Hi, welcome back to I Own a Business. I am joined today by Joy Gibb, a highly respected optician and industry leader, to talk about a topic that often gets overlooked. That would be how the optical experience ties directly into patient care and the patient experience, and how practices can strengthen both patient outcomes and optical success. And we're going to dig into that a lot deeper. So, welcome, Joy.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I'm super excited to be here with you.
It's great to have you. I've been wanting to have you on for a while, so I'm glad we made this work. Um, to dig a little deeper into that topic, I think we often look at the clinical and the medical side, or the clinical or medical side and the optical, as sort of two different entities,
Yeah.
separated from one another. But we're going to blur the margins a little bit on that perception today. And I want to get your sense of how opticians in particular can make a broader impact beyond just helping them pick out glasses, just helping them through the lens process or insurance. They play a much bigger role in the patient experience, patient outcomes, and how that ties in with the experience they get from the optometrist, and maybe even likely their primary care physician. So I teed it up for you, and you were just giving me a story before this that was great. So that's where my mind is at right now. But please expand on that.
So I really believe that we have patients in exam lanes, but customers in the optical because it is an exchange of goods and money. However, I think it's a very unique area where we can also craft eyewear that's personalized to the patient's needs, whether those are for visual acuity or for lifestyle. And for me, I think that one of the most important things is I have to know the patient. Before I can really craft something that's going to be the most beneficial, I need to know who they are, what their expectations are, what their priorities are. And so as we go through that and really talk with them, it allows me to kind of explore maybe areas that they could be getting different sets of eyewear that they just may not realize they need. We're really solving problems that they don't realize they have. And so for me, as I work with my patients, and I gave you this example of this darling older lady, she's very arthritic. Her neck is bad. So getting her a pair of glasses where she can sit at a musical focal length is super important. So she's not having to tilt her head up. The other part of that is she likes to move her hands, which are also getting arthritic. And being able to play the piano brings her a lot of peace and a lot of joy. And so for me to be able to craft a pair of glasses that allows her to sit down and really enjoy her lifestyle is going to improve her mental health. It's going to help with her physical movement of her fingers, and it's going to help with some of her cognitive ability to stay sharp. And so for me, I dispense as much from the visual acuity part as much as I do the lifestyle part. And I think the lifestyle part can go hand in hand as we enhance patients' lives through what we're dispensing. It's not just a pair of glasses, it's somebody's independence, it's somebody's joy.
I was just reading something before we jumped on about it was an article on sales, and the part of the article that caught my attention was it said, "Be like a doctor and fully understand the problem before you diagnose this." And I thought, before you diagnose it, and I thought, doctors actually don't do that very well.
Yeah.
We don't. We're quick to jump in with the solution before we fully understand the problem. We listen to the symptoms, but we don't really hear the problem behind the problem. And people aren't usually going to volunteer that information unless you probe a little bit more. With doctors, I think they naturally assume we're busy, so they're not going to give us the full story. And you just explained something very eloquently on the optical side. I think it's something we can all do better. What is your approach to asking questions or just getting patients to open up and be more transparent with things that are going on in their life?
Yeah, so I think for me, one thing that comes to mind is just basically saying to patients, what are your expectations and how do you plan on using eyewear? And I can give you a perfect example. We had a gentleman who came in and he came back in saying, I can't see up close. I can't see up close. I can't see up close. And the doctor kind of came out and he's like, I don't get it. He's reading just fine. And so the simple question when I went in was, what are you doing when you can't see up close? And that made all the difference in the world because he said, I paint these little tiny figurines and they're very detail oriented. And I said, oh, well, where do you hold them when you're painting them? And he was like, here. And I'm like, problem solved. Give him a higher ad power because, this is not a normal reading length. He wanted something that was going to be a lot closer. And so I think just that, how are you planning on using them? I also am a huge proponent that we look at maybe the pediatric sides of the medical industry and how good they are at asking questions. When you go in for a child well check, it's basically, are you wearing a bike helmet? Are you staying safe on the internet? Are you using the proper, child car seat? So for me, there's just some basic questions like, how old is your current glasses prescription? If I'm writing you contact lenses prescription, contact lenses are going to be the backup to the glasses. And we should have learned that during COVID, right? And so the question then becomes is if you had to go a week without contact lenses, how well would you see out of the glasses you currently have? Second question is, are you wearing sunglasses? Third question is, do you know about computer lenses and do you have some computer lenses? And then it also gets into just the lifestyle. I mean, I think we start with those 3, but then as we start to see, I enjoy, quilting, I enjoy painting, then we can start formulating different pairs of glasses with different focal lengths and maybe do full field readers. That was for my dad, he had Parkinson's disease. And for him, this was years ago, to be in a flat top 35, neurologically, he couldn't get to the end of the line, come back, and drop down. But the minute I put him in a full field reader, his eye relaxed and he was able to do that beautifully. And that was what he did for enjoyment, once he took disability. And so for me, it really is about thinking, how do I improve lifestyle? But also, am I asking the basic questions, and just, I think honestly, when we start asking questions, we don't look like we're selling. We look like we're genuinely interested in what they're doing. And so I think even the question of, are you wearing something to protect your eyes when you're cleaning the shower? I mean, just to me, it needs to be an overall care experience, not just here's your prescription, go to the dispensary, good luck with that. Like, I just think there needs to be more conversation with the patient.
Yeah. And I would agree completely. I think questions are the most powerful part of the experience. And
Yeah.
it really aligns with the surveys that show when they ask patients, what is the most important thing you look for in a doctor, or what are the most important qualities that you rate in doctors that you would rate highly? And pretty consistently, the answer is doctors who make me feel heard and understood.
Yeah.
The only
The
way you can do that is to ask more questions and spend less time talking.
Yeah. And I think the other one that comes up is quantity of time. Like I've seen a lot of surveys that say, gosh, I just wish the doctor would spend more time with me. I don't think you need to spend necessarily more time. You need to be smart about the time you spend and you need to make sure it's quality. I think as a doctor, even your techs could be asking these questions, and then the tech and the doctor have a debrief in front of the patient. This is what we talked about. Is that right, Mrs. Smith? The doctor's got it from here and he's going to make some great recommendations. And I think even the text making recommendations, computer, somewhere, that's huge too, to say we have solutions. And the more the patient hears that, the more they understand and realize they're going to be buying more than one pair of glasses.
Yeah, and it's interesting too on the time component because I've seen that both ways.
Mhm.
I wish the doctor would spend more time. I've also seen situations where patients in surveys said, I wish I wasn't here for so long. So there is some balance in between. But are we even hearing that in the right context? When a patient says, or your patients routinely say, I wish I had more time with the doctor, are they saying, I want the doctor to do more tests and spin more dials? and all those things, all the clinical side? Or are they saying, I wish the doctor would listen to me? I left here feeling like I didn't get a chance to say what I wanted to say, or I felt misunderstood. And I bet more times than not, that's the situation when a patient says, I wish I had more time with the doctor.
Yeah. And I think there's a couple solutions you can kind of look at for that. Like, especially we have a little bit of an older demographic. And so we, typically will say, if you know you have questions, write them down before you come in. So we make sure we get them all answered during your appointment. And again, I think there is that balance, but I think showing a patient their fundus photo, they think that's the coolest thing in the whole world is to see the inside of their eye and for you to explain what you see, and then really honestly to hear them. And I think even if you just make one tiny connection, oh, that's my favorite college team too. Oh, I also enjoy running, whatever it is, that leads you to that relationship, right? The family coming in, and look, we're not gonna remember every patient and every detail, but how hard is it to write, "Son is getting married," and then the next time they come in, that note is there to remind us to say, "How was the wedding?" Those are the kinds of things that make that time feel like it's a little bit longer and a little bit higher quality because we're vested in that relationship.
I think this is going to be a good tie into something else we talked about before was core values, and I want to lean into that topic. But this has been really interesting because when we do ask more questions, when we do more listening, when we better understand, and you used a very important word, connect. That connection I think is so important on the clinical side in the exam room and on the optical side as well. I think through that you establish a couple things. One of them is you build trust. I think the longer you're there asking questions and listening in genuine curiosity, I think the trust factor starts to go up. And also, that patient becomes much more confident in your professional recommendations or what you're prescribing. And I think, above all, a patient, a consumer, a client, one thing we need is to feel confident in our decision. When we lack that, that's when we balk. That's when we hesitate. That's when we say, I'll think about it. I'll come back. How much
Yeah,
does that cost? All
yeah,
those point toward a lack of confidence. And that's totally
yeah.
within our control as an optician or as a doctor to play a role in boosting the confidence of the consumer, whether it's on the optical side or the healthcare consumer.
Yeah, I've seen too many opticians, especially young, early on in their years, as they're sliding that paper over to tell the patient how much it is, they're almost apologetic and putting their head down and shaking it back and forth. And, I just think, gosh, by the time you craft what you know is best, what you would do for your parent or your grandparent, you can hold your head up high and just say, "This is what we talked about, and this is what you said the priorities were, and this is what it's gonna be." And I expect that because I'm a professional and that I've gained your trust, that you're gonna buy something.
Right. And if you're not confident, how confident are they going to be?
Yeah, exactly. My biggest compliment is when people come in saying, "Gosh, I hate picking out glasses. This is the worst thing in the world." And I just kind of get that sense of, "Well, buckle up. This is gonna be a styling experience like none other." And to have them say, "That was the easiest time I've ever had picking out glasses." And that's what it is developing that skill set where you are confident in your recommendations and what you're pulling, so there isn't a question that you are the professional and that you are taking the lead.
You've talked before about core value dispensing.
Yeah.
What does that term mean to you?
So for me, I do focus a lot on core values. I do probably twice a year do some exercises where I look at different values and I integrate them both into my personal and professional life. And so the one that rings true to me is the integrity value. And so for me, I think, what does integrity really mean when I'm working with my patient? And when I look at my why as to why I show up to work every day and why I love what I have done for the last 39 years, is I honestly want my patients to have the best experience, leaving with the best visual acuity and the best lifestyle choices possible. It can't be monetarily driven, but for me, I know that when I have the integrity to say, "This is really what's best for you, and I really would suggest that you get this many pairs," it's not a ridiculous ask. that really is me living my core value of offering appropriate product, creating solutions to problems they don't know they have, and introducing them to ideas of how they can enhance lifestyle. Does that mean they're gonna walk out with 5 pair at one time? No. But that does mean that at least I've put the seed in there, I've laid the groundwork. A lot of times they'll go home and think about it and be like, "Yeah, you talked to me about that. Maybe it is time we address the disappointment." And so it really is if you can operate from that place of, why you show up to work and what you hope to accomplish that day, something bigger than yourself, for me, that makes the job so much more enjoyable, makes the patient experience so much better, and like you said, creates that trust and that loyalty. People buy you before they buy product. And so for you to be able to have that ability to just make those suggestions and have them be successful and have them make a difference in lifestyle enhancement, that's huge. That's huge, and they'll trust you with every recommendation you make from there on out.
I notice that core values, because we have them at IDOC. I don't know if I personally have official core values, but now you've got me rethinking that. So that's on my list
Good.
to formalize it. But I will say professionally, and maybe you find this as well, it helps streamline decisions.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like, when I hold true to my core values, I am not second guessing myself. I am not thinking, "Oh, should I? Shouldn't I?" Like, no, it's just, I know this is what works. I know this is what's going to be successful. And so, and to be honest, I don't have to prove my worth to anyone, right? Like, for me, that's probably the best part of it is just being like, I'm really good at what I do. And I know that what I'm offering you is the very best thing possible. And so it does streamline it. It does make it super easy to go, look, I can just, this is what you're going to tell me. Great. Let's prioritize what's most important to you today so that then I can, craft and personalize 3 or 4 or 5 pairs of glasses and allow you to make the decision of what you want to take with you today, what you're going to think about for the next time. And I'm a pre-measure, like, I'll just say, "Let me if you love these 2 frames, let me write down both of them. I'll measure you for both of them so you don't even have to come back in. We can just make the phone call and get it ordered." So, making it easy for the patient too is a huge part of it. They'll go home and think about it, and they'll call you.
You've used that word a couple times, easy. I think that's really important, especially with a younger demographic. And I always say, if you want to see what the future is going to look like, look at your kids. So
Yep.
I've got two teenagers who don't know a world without being able to get anything they want at the touch of a button, right? That's tomorrow's consumer.
Yeah.
So when you look at your operations and your systems, is it easy? Is it simple? Is that something that you guys go back and reevaluate? And I think any organization could probably look at how they do things and find areas of friction that they could really
Absolutely.
put some effort into changing that.
Right. And I think there is that fine balance too. I think you have tenured employees who have a lot of experience who change is hard, right? And you've got the younger generation coming and going, "Why are we doing it this way?" And I think you do have to have those moments where you sit down and stop justifying the stupid systems because that's just how you've always done it and try something new. It doesn't mean it's always gonna be successful, and this is another thing I wholeheartedly believe in. You need to allow your team members to make those suggestions and implement those changes, and even if it fails, it's not a failure, it's an opportunity to learn what did or didn't work. And there might be parts of it that did work, and it might be that we need to blend the old and the new, that there's aspects that are good from both of them. And so for me, that's important to have team member input when you do things like that. But I do think we justify a lot of stupid systems. I really do. And I think that we need to train our dispensers, especially to just start thinking with the end in mind. We start with the end in mind. Like, what is the finished product going to look like? How many pairs does this patient really need? And when we start crafting from that standpoint, the end always is much more successful than if we're just like, oh, yay, I sold a pair of glasses, right? Like, Yes, that's what you're supposed to do, right? That's like, here's a trophy for showing up. But for me, I mean, it's like find that fulfillment, find the excitement in your job by really stretching, yourself maybe in your comfort zone, and don't do what's always been comfortable inside the box. Be brave enough to ask the questions.
Don't they call it the seven most deadly words in business? We have always done it that way.
Yes, yes, yes.
Where do you stand on, speaking of perhaps old methods that we could reevaluate? So a lot of doctors have a resistance toward anything that feels like selling at all in the exam room, to the point where they almost at times withhold information that would be helpful to the patient, because they say, well, I don't sell, I'm not involved on the retail, I don't want anything to do with that. I think I know where you're going by this way you're shaking your head, but I'll get it from you in a second. But we know that their recommendations carry a lot of weight in the optical. What would you say to doctors that are completely hands off on any discussions around um, product or optical driven discussions?
Yeah, I feel very passionately about this one. For me, I do think doctors should be product specific in their recommendations. The reason being is that if you know what's going to work, right, and you know that this is a great product, the minute that prescription leaves your office because they want to go big box warehouse or somewhere other than you, if they're not looking for specific products, they're just gonna get whatever, and then the prescription all of a sudden may not be right, and their inclination is not to say, "Oh, I didn't get the right product," their inclination is to say, "The doctor didn't do a good refraction," right? So I think maintaining that control. I am particularly passionate about this when it comes to contact lenses. When contact lens sales started, in big box retail and in, online sales, it went from being a medical device to a commodity. And so in our office, we do try very hard to make sure we add the medical aspects of contact lenses. And we do that by saying, we have chosen product A because in looking at your cornea today, it looked a little dry. So this lens material has more hydration, and not all lenses are made the same way. So this is the best choice for you. We looked today, and it doesn't look like you're being very compliant and you're overwearing your lenses, and so this is medically what we could be looking at if you continue to do that. So maybe let's put you in a different brand so that you can make it easier to be compliant, and then the patient can be a longer term wearer of contact lenses. And I think I shared with you, the example is if you went to your family doctor and just said, "Hey, I'm super depressed. Can you just give me something?" If that doctor turned around and pulled out a list of 40 antidepressants and handed it to you without telling you side effects, without telling you, what to expect from it, and just said, "You just pick. You just pick whichever one you want," we would look at that as being terrible medical care, right? As being irresponsible in our care for the patient. And I really don't think it's any different for us. Yes, we're selling them, you know, product in the end, but we still have to address the medical concerns. And I think once you start to do product specific recommendations based on medical findings, medical, how do I retain the vision I have? How do I restore the vision that I've lost? When you start working in that capacity, product specific recommendations are vital because you know what works. You've seen the success. And if they go out and order them online and they don't know what they're doing, like it just becomes super messy. And then we have patients who aren't seeing well. And if they put on glasses that they don't see well with, it's a daily reminder of how unhappy they were with you and your practice.
They want the recommendation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we would, if we were, and we would want somebody to tell us, because I think as consumers, again, the thing we typically want above almost everything is we want to be confident. If I'm going to spend a lot of money with you, especially, I'm going to hand over my credit card, I want to feel very confident in my decision. You said a couple things before that I want to go back because I was scribbling here as you were writing, but the example that you gave with contact lenses and the example you said, we did some tests and we noticed that you have dry eye. This contact lens would be the best choice for you. So it wasn't just a matter of saying this is the best contact. You put the why behind it. This is the problem that it solves. Because so often, and I hear this a lot from doctors, I hear it from opticians, especially when they're struggling in the optical, they'll say, I don't get it. We always prescribe the best eyewear, the best technology. Joy, to this day, I don't know what that means. What does that mean to
It means
me? That it's the best. You know what I hear when you say that? I hear it's the most expensive. That's all I hear. But when you say
exactly.
we saw dry eye, these are the best, this is the best choice for you because of this reason. And then you said the um I lost my train of thought. But here's medically what we're looking. I couldn't read. I scribbled too much here, Joy. I was trying to write too fast and I scribbled and I
Good.
can't read my own writing. And you also said, as an example, something you might say to the patient, medically, this is what we're looking at if we don't intervene with this. And
Yeah.
again, I think that really is a powerful statement to the patient because our two dominant motivators are desire for gain and fear of loss. And we can hit both of those, but actually the thing that motivates us more than anything is the fear of losing something.
Yeah.
And so to phrase it in a way ethically, we're not trying to scare them into a sale, but when we see something that justifiably warrants a comment that medically, here's what we're looking at if we don't intervene, that really gets the patient to stop and think.
You know, so when your texts are doing family histories, if macular degeneration comes up, for me, that is a spot where you could easily say, "Are you wearing quality sunglasses? Are you reducing your blue light? Are your children doing it? And are your grandchildren doing it?" And I think just by doing that line of questioning, they stop being a wallet with legs sitting in the chair that we need to sell glasses to, and we embrace and care for the whole family because we don't want them to have the same outcome. And I can give you a wonderful example. I have a beautiful patient who has macular degeneration, and every year on her grandchildren's birthday, she buys them a pair of quality sunglasses as their birthday present because she does not want them to have the same situation. And I think that education portion of it of saying, we care about you, but we care about your family. We care about what could happen if we don't start following these recommendations. And I think that's huge. How do we retain the vision that we have? That's so important for people. I mean, vision ties into, our cognitive, our mental health. It ties into so much. And I think that, I mean, for me, it is a matter of looking at those, questions as being able to connect dots for better care overall.
Another powerful aspect of questions is it gets people curious and it gets them asking themselves. And so, again, the story you used about AMD, instead of saying you have a family history of AMD, so I'm going to prescribe sunglasses, if it's just rephrased in a very simple way, you have a history of AMD, do you wear sunglasses? Do your kids wear sunglasses? That triggers that curiosity in people's heads and it causes them to go, no, but should I be?
Yeah.
When you get people on that track, you are going to take them down a journey of exploring their own reasons for wanting to do something. If you think about it, most of our decisions, most of our consumer decisions, especially ones that require a fair amount of money, it does not start with somebody else coming in and giving us the information. It does not start with education. It starts with curiosity. When's the
Oh,
last time you bought anything of any significant value and didn't ask a few questions first? So the goal of this, all too often, people in positions, doctors do it, opticians do it, is they try to get someone to do something through education when so much more powerful because it gets people asking their own questions. Should I do this? How does this benefit me? What do I lose if I don't do this? Curiosity is what drives most of our decisions.
oh, absolutely. And I think I'm a why girl. Give me the why. Why do I have to do this? Why is this a good thing for me to do? And I think a lot of people are that way. And I think it goes hand in hand, getting that curiosity and explaining to people, This is why we're recommending it, and here's the ramifications of what could happen if you do or don't follow this advice. Now, as a medical professional, I'm going to give you that medical advice. Are you always going to follow it? No, but at least I feel comfortable when I go back to my core value that I've done what I need to do with confidence. And then I continue to educate that patient every time I see them. Like it's not a one time discussion like, well, they blew me off last time. It's a no, this is where I operate from. And so we're going to keep making these suggestions every time they come in.
Any tips on the education part? Because another thing that I think a lot of times we do, I know it happens a lot of times in sales, it happens with doctors, is we confuse people, but they don't tell us they don't understand what we're talking about. And I've seen it happen before where a lot of big words are used, verbiage. We think the other person understands what we're saying. Do you know what they found to be the number one source of miscommunication
Oh,
between doctor and patient? It's the
what's
head
that?
nod. The doctor's talking
Okay.
and the patient's nodding their head. And based on that, the doctor thinks the patient understands. When
Yeah,
they don't, then they leave. And what do we do? How many times people call you and say, "Hey, I know they do it for you. They did it for me on the OD side." People call you. Maybe they couldn't come to you because they
for
don't live
sure.
by you or something, and they say, I went to the eye doctor and they said I need this. And they always butcher the explanation. You have to kind of piece it together because you know enough about it. But it's it happens a lot in the doctor's room too, where patients leave feeling confused. Any tips on the education side, on the optical, of how to keep things, as you've used the word a few times, easy and simple for the patient to understand?
So I think a perfect example is when you're trying to explain what a polarized lens will do. So technically, polarized lenses filter out all horizontal light. That means nothing to a patient. But when I say to a patient, have you ever felt uncomfortable or unsafe when you've been driving into the sunrise to drop your kid off at school and you didn't see the kid on the bike? The beautiful thing about a polarized lens is that it's going to reduce so much glare that you experience that you'll be more safe when you're driving and you'll be able to see that child. And so for me, it really is taking it into the what this means to you is, right? So even if the doctor hears, I don't feel safe driving at night, right? Doctor's natural inclination is going to say, let's talk about anti-reflective. That collaboration with the optician and the doctor in front of a patient is super important. And then we reiterate that. And when we come to the end and we've chosen anti-reflective for your lenses because you mentioned you don't feel safe driving at night, and this will help with that, right? I'm not gonna guarantee them that it's gonna solve all their problems, but it's going to help. I'm gonna get you to a place where maybe you will feel a little more comfortable and are able to drive at night for a little bit longer.
Yeah, if that was one area I would stress, people who are in sales, people who are even doctors, healthcare professionals, really work on would be to educate in a way that's clear, simple, and understandable to the other person. There's a quote I use a lot in the talks that I do, and it's not my quote, but I wish it was. It's really simple. It's from Dr. Robert Cialdini, who wrote the book Influence, and the quote is this: "Confused people don't buy anything."
Oh, amen.
And it's scary the number of people who leave optometry practices confused about what they heard. So yeah, that's something I would really stress. And as we close out here, Joy, I know there's people listening to this and wanting to, maybe they have a Joy Gibb in the practice, but how do you scale what you do in terms of you working with other opticians? Is it um, from a training standpoint? Because it's very difficult, from what I hear these days, to find good opticians.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
That being said, how do we train more of them? Or if you have a optician like a Joy Gibb, because I will hear this, I'll hear, oh, we've got this one optician who's so good, but the other ones really struggle. Well, why doesn't the one who's good teach the others? But what is your approach? What any suggestions that you have in terms of training on the optical side?
I think education is a huge part of it. And again, as a matter of fact, I just got done teaching this weekend and just simply going through refractive errors and what that means. What is myopia? What is hyperopia? Because then that makes sense to them why they're making lenses and what that's doing for the patient. So I think even just making sure we get basic level, I think making sure that you have the tools necessary, the equipment to make them successful. I think mentoring is a huge part of it. But I also really believe that, and I'm going to say this because I hear it all the time. Doctors say, "What if I train them and they leave?" And my response is, "What if you
And I
don't train
stay.
them and they stay?" Right? And so I think it is worth investing. And I think when you show the investment, you show how important they are to the team and that they can make a career out of it. They can make a fabulous, joyful career out of it. I haven't worked a day in my life in 39 years. I love what I do. And I think a lot of that became from the fact that people were always willing to invest their time in me, to invest money to get me trained. And that made me become a little more curious and say, what else do I want to learn? And I go out and I teach as you do. And I love when I come home and I'm like, I've been doing this for 39 years. And I heard something this weekend that made me go, oh, I need to revisit that. Or, oh, that's a great idea. And I could implement that in my practice differently. I think you have to expose yourself, right? Like you have to expose yourself to the educational opportunities that are out there. And it's more than just having your rep bring lunch. It's really digging in and getting into some of these classes and one of the best things I've ever seen is when the doctor will say, "Let's look at the 2 most intriguing cases of the week." And, like, let's really walk through that, and how could we have helped the patient better than what we did? And for me, when that collaboration comes with the doctor, that the optician and the doctor collaborate knowing they both play a super integral part in the success of the patient, that translates to the patient. And it's not just the optician, it's the respected provider that helps the doctor create visual acuity and lifestyle enhancements for the patient.
And it's just such a better experience for the patient. And I hope people got out of this the patient first mentality
Yeah.
and the value of building long-term relationships. Because I've whenever I hear somebody say I never felt like I worked a day in my life or I love what I do, it's interesting because I've heard people say that the one common theme in that is what they love is the relationships that they built with the patients. I've seen practices that struggle financially.
Yep.
It's difficult to, they're just getting started, but they'd be like, I love what I do. And they're not, I've heard practice owners say that who were not, um, monetarily very successful with the practice, but they love the relationship side of what they
Yeah.
do. I think that's so critical.
And I think we hear every patient's a VIP, and I think for so long, very important person, they're very individual people. And I think for me, that's what VIP means. And so let me craft an experience that is just for you as an individual. It's not what I'm going to do for every single patient that walks through the door. And for me, that's what keeps the day interesting too, is being able to kind of think on the go and to be able to craft things and do things that are individualized to my patients.
Well, Joy, thank you so much. This has been great.
You. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Where can people find you if they want to hire you, if they want you to speak? Where would we go to find Joy Gibb?
Yeah, you can just shoot me an email at eyesofjoy@yahoo.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Eyes of Joy. So yeah, I would love to work with anybody that's interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Well, thanks everyone for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.